out the entanglement of headphones I have around here. Trying to find the right one.
Yeah, technology can be challenging at times.
Yeah. Morning, Harry. How you doing? Good morning, everybody. So I think we got almost everybody. Just waiting on Carl, I think.
Hi, everyone. Sorry I'm a bit late.
Good morning.
So Manny, I think you're right. I think we've got everybody.
Yeah, so I think we're all here. Hey, everybody. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Thanks, everybody, for making the time this early in the morning. I'm hearing a little bit of feedback. I don't know if everyone's muted or not. But let's see. So I want to just remind everybody, we all agreed that it'd be okay to record this meeting. So I believe Harry will be taking care of that for us. So our meeting will be recorded. I was just hoping, especially since we have a few new folks since the last meeting, if maybe we can just do a quick round of introductions, if that's okay. So, I think I'll start. So I'm Manny Ramirez. I'm a third-year PhD student in the sociology department at UConn.
So Manny, so we don't talk over one another, why don't you call on us, use your participant list and call on us in order.
Sure, sounds good. Yeah, so next I have UConn, actually, so thank you.
Okay, so my name is Kent Holsinger. I'm Vice Provost for Graduate Education, Dean of the Graduate School, and I've been a faculty member in ecology and evolutionary biology for many years.
Ashley?
Good morning. I'm Ashley Robinson. I am a PhD candidate in leadership and education policy and the Vice President of the Graduate Employee Union.
Thanks, Ashley. Carl?
Carl Lejuez. I'm the new provost and professor in psychology. I've throughout my research career have worked with about 20 PhD students, and I was also faculty on the clinical master's program at Maryland, and previously was the Dean of Arts and Sciences and interim provost at the University of Kansas.
Thank you, Carl. Next on my list, I have Harry.
Hi, everyone. I'm Harry. I am a rising senior at UConn, study political science, environmental economics.
Thank you, Harry. Jordan?
I'm Jordan McMillan. I am a PhD candidate in sociology, and I am the president of the GEU.
Thank you, Jordan. Next we have Robert, Master Robert.
I'm Rob Smith. I'm a second-year master's student in civil and environmental engineering, and I passed my defense last week, so now I'm going to no longer be a grad student soon.
Thanks, Rob. Shannon?
Hi, I'm Shannon Kelly. I'm a third-year PhD student in curriculum and instruction.
All right. Thank you, Shannon. And then lastly, Steve.
What's going on, y'all? I'm Steve Nunez. I am a third-year PhD student of philosophy department.
All right, thanks everybody for that, and again, thanks all for being here. So this is a continuation of a conversation that a few of us had a couple weeks ago around discussing how to think through decision making at UConn, right? So a few grad organizers we had from the first town hall met with Provost Lejuez and Dean Holsinger to talk through those things. And this week is the second round of conversations, and we've also brought in some other folks, Shannon, Steve, and Harry, who have also been organizing around campus in other groups, right, around multiple issues. So last meeting, Provost Lejuez and Dean Holsinger left us with some questions to think about. One being about how we're understanding and distinguishing between democratic governance, collaborative governance, and what we would call shared governance. So first, I think we want to start off with getting the administration's understanding of how they would define collaborative governance, and then we would like to then respond with our understanding of shared governance.
I can do that. And maybe shared governance is collaborative governance, so I want to leave that open, but at least in my circles, what people call shared governance is very different. So I've been wary about that term. So again, maybe it's the same, maybe it's not. But what collaborative governance is that there are channels in place where issues are brought up while they are issues and problems before final decisions are made. And there are conversations, and when decisions are made, there is either changes based on those conversations and that feedback, or that when the decision is made, there is a clear explanation of why the decision did not include any feedback that was given. So that is the way that I would define collaborative.
All right. So what we would like to do now is then give you a better idea of what we mean by shared governance, to also then give you, the administration, a very clear idea of what we are looking for and what we're asking for in terms of commitment, right, from the administration, and what we're trying to get out of this meeting and right, any kind of collaboration moving forward. Ashley, would you be okay with starting off our side? Is that okay?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I appreciate Provost Lejuez, your description of that, because obviously you posed that question to us last time, and when we were discussing as a group, I said, I think we need to understand, right, what these different meanings might be. And, I think that from our perspective, the idea of shared governance is really rooted in a more democratic principle, which is truly about having decision-making power and having students included in decision-making power. So I think that, the sort of description of collaboration that you just outlined, some of the characteristics of that include things like input and gathering information and communication with stakeholders. But ultimately, that type of setup still, it still doesn't include a meaningful decision-making power that sits with students. And I think that that's the key difference in terms of how we see the way that we would really like to see shared governance move forward at the university is that we recognize that even when there are practices in place that are really engaging in, good communication with stakeholders, that are engaging in robust feedback, that are engaging multiple stakeholders, which I think we also feel is not necessarily the case. So I think that there's still actually even quite a ways to go from a lot of the current practices that we see to even having that kind of robust type of collaboration. But for us, the more important additional step beyond that communication and beyond that type of discussion or stakeholder involvement is the decision-making process and having more student involvement in the decision-making process. I know that some of the things that we've talked about as a group have really focused on maybe some of the higher level organizational functions at the university. So for example, we've talked about the fact that we think that it's really important to critically re-examine what the Board of Trustees looks like and how that operates. Obviously, that's based in, state legislation. We certainly understand that. To be talking about, some of the committees that we have discussed thus far that are sort of university-wide committees, having varied and, diverse student representation on those committees and those students having a say in the decisions that are made. But I think also something that we have started to talk more about within our group and in the students that are organizing is the reality that there are actually many, many decisions, policy implementation decisions, policy creation decisions that are happening throughout the university on an everyday basis. This is the kind of thing that I study, so I think quite a bit about how that happens at the university, but that within departments and programs and offices, there are a lot of decisions that are being made. Excuse me. And so really, right, when we're thinking about what is a true shift, like a real reimagining of what it means to include student voices, it's not just saying, that we've maybe changed the structure of some of the sort of university-wide committees that we see. We changed the structure of potentially the Board of Trustees, but that it's really important to have a strong sense throughout the university and a strong sense of accountability that departments throughout the university are taking into account and including the voices of students and students' experiences in decision-making processes, and that students have avenues through which they are involved in those types of things. I think we certainly understand, I understand perhaps more than anybody, that the university includes a complex array of faculty and staff who are differently positioned, who are doing different kinds of things all the time. And that the goal is not then to just create an open town hall for every single decision that happens at the university, but that there are ways to meaningfully incorporate decision-making power from students in a variety of different aspects, whether that's academic, whether that's related to student life, whether that's related to, budgetary decisions, student code of conduct. Like there's shifts that could happen. And I think that really is sort of the vision that we have. And the key distinction, again, there is the difference between input and feedback and having decision-making power involved in those situations.
Yes, and I would just like to really highlight what Ashley was saying, especially at the end there, right? The really major distinction is a lot of the problems that we're facing, right? And our group is comprised of, again, many different groups organizing around many different issues around UConn, right? And we keep kind of running into similar problems where there may be some representation, there may be definitely town halls in many ways where the administration is getting feedback from us, right, or input, as Ashley's saying, but at the end of the day, we don't find much change occurring because of the way decision making is structured in the university, right? So what we're asking specifically is not for advisory committees, advisory groups, ad hoc committees, right? We're not asking for that whatsoever. What we're asking, as Ashley is saying, for more decision making power for students, for staff, for workers, for faculty, so we can continue to make UConn a strong, better university. And I don't know anyone else from our group wants to jump in and add on. Yeah, Harry, go for it.
Okay. So I don't want to speak for the whole group because I'm relatively new to this, so I don't want to be like the voice of you guys. But I guess a question I have to Carl and Ken is, how do you? I think like to me personally, one of the biggest, like, most undemocratic parts of UConn is the Board of Trustees, right? It's just this group of people that the governor basically selects to run the university. How do you justify that? Like, why is the Board of Trustees allowed to, like, in your conception, like, why is the Board of Trustees the right way to govern a university?
So I will tell you, for me as provost, there's a lot of things that I do have oversight in. This is one of those where I don't. So, I mean, I don't know. I want to think about this answer after I say it, but I don't think about it a lot because I don't have any influence in it. I suspect if I went to Tom, if I went to the governor, if I went to the Board of Trustees and said, I don't believe in this system, it would have no impact. And so I'm trying to focus my energy on things where I think I can have some impact. So I've really not thought about it a whole lot. This is the governing structure that I came into, and there's a lot of other things that now what I can do is I can figure out how to work more closely with the Board of Trustees so they are not telling us what to do. So one thing that I've done is I've started meeting with the academic affairs director every 2 weeks or so. So I bring her things when there are issues and talk it through with her. And so in every case so far, when I've talked it through with her, there's never been a case where the board is, at least on the academic side. So, but the board has never told me what we have to do in that period. So I do want to think about it more because, to be frank, I just haven't, but that's the reason why I haven't focused on it, because I don't know how I would have much impact on it, even if I felt strongly. Kent, I don't know if you want to add anything to that. Oh, you're on, right? You're mute, Kent.
Yeah. I'll add a little bit. Carl, because of his position, obviously has much more direct, frequent interactions with the Board of Trustees than I do. But as a longtime faculty member at UConn before becoming dean, I also served as one of the faculty representatives to the board for about 10 years. So I have some sense of the way it works. And my sense is actually that the board provides substantial oversight, but at an enormously high level that has very little impact on the day-to-day life of faculty, staff, or students. So they ultimately are responsible for setting the budget. But with respect to virtually every university policy that happens, even if it does require board approval, it can work through with staff and faculty and students long before it ever gets to the board. And that by the time it gets to the board, the persons responsible for presenting it to the board knows so much more about the issue than any part-time board member ever could, that it would be extremely unusual for the board to push back on that. So although formally, legally, there is little decision-making authority, and I would point out, in fact, there are 2 elected student members of the Board of Trustees and 2 elected alumni members, so it's not entirely governor appointed. But in terms of actual impact on daily lives, I don't think decisions at the board level typically really affect anyone here nearly as much as decisions Carl or I make.
We have Steve next on the stack in the chat.
I somewhat disagree with you there, and I think that especially budgetary shit is really, really important. And that sort of is a good segue into, I guess, for me, Carl and Kent, part of the decision-making process, I think, is like having conversations like this and getting advocacy by people like you that actually have access to the offices that we're talking about. For example, I have been asking officially through the Graduate Student Senate for simple access to the endowment. Access to the endowment for a public university. I've been shut out at every single step of the way. Tom knows about this. Everybody knows about this. We've started student organizations about this. I'm at the point where, like, I want UConn to pay me to pay a lawyer for me so I can be a plaintiff to access the endowment for the university I attend. Like, that's where I'm at in this process. Legitimately, that's probably what's going to happen this semester. I'm going to be real with you. It's the only way that we're able to actually have conversations in the public about what the fuck is going on with endowments. And it's outrageous. I'm writing a philosophy dissertation, perhaps on the prison industrial complex and the ways that universities are tied into it, and I don't even have access to the fucking endowment to know. Like, at every point I've been told, no, you can't have access because it's a legal thing. So we're in this spot where it's like, no, I recognize that the foundation is something separate than the university and it's protected by law, but that doesn't stop folks like you, Carl, and Kent, and Tom from actually saying, no, we actually are interested in seeing what's in there too, right? And actually helping us get the things in the transparent UConn that we're actually trying to attain. But like at every step of the way, from the department all the way up, I lied. I actually feel very comfortable with like the advocacy that Don Baxter has done for me and that Lewis has done is doing for me as the incoming department chair. So I speak very highly of the philosophy department in public, but the rest of the university outside of that has been just stalemates of like, I've had public conversations like this in the race dialogue, sitting literally right next to Tom, where I'm like, hey, if we're actually talking about creating a more just and equitable UConn, let's talk about what's in the endowment and where the money is going and who, like, what is going on. So this is a long-term conversation that I've been having around prisons. And undergraduates started asking for the endowment in 2016. Like, hey, what's in it? We just want to know what's in it so we can have a real conversation. But we don't even have access to it. So in terms of like, even like the FOIA process is just broken. Like I recently accessed, so just for a little bit more context, I'm a former Special Forces weapons sergeant as well in the United States Army. So I have a very, very deep knowledge and understanding of what weapon systems have the capabilities of doing to human beings. So I FOIA'd the inventory of the police department. I said, I'm interested in knowing, because the Marshall report put out, I know they have at least 2 sniper rifles and at least 15 ARs that they recently bought that the Marshall report actually had access to. So I know that there's access to the inventory, but I recently got a FOIA that says, oh, this is kind of a space where we don't actually have to give you that. So like, what are the sort of backstops, and what can y'all at the graduate school and you as the provost like do to help students, particularly graduate students, access the information that should be transparent and public in the first place, so that we can start creating new institutions like a prison education program to start counteracting every violence that happens to this, and reconsidering what community members actually are of the university and a public system, and who those people are and who should have access to the resources here. So yeah, I guess that's my big question, is like, how can we across these lines? I put up a tweet the other day that asked faculty members, what are y'all doing in this moment of defunding police and divesting from prisons? No responses. And it wasn't like an inflammatory, I'm generally curious, because I think there are faculty members that are doing things about this and thinking about this in their own personal lives, but there seems to be a disconnect where like students are doing all the heavy lifting and we don't get paid for this shit. Like, so I view students and graduate students as like literally the greatest unpaid labor focus group in the history of the Western episteme, and we're literally giving solutions and coming up with ideas that are just being like, nah, y'all are just students, shut the fuck up. Let the board of trustees handle it. And it's really, really dehumanizing. On top of that, then you go and you hire new positions like the VP CDO to fucking come pay Robin DiAngelo $22,000 to do something that I get paid to literally teach the same fucking subject in for half the price to 80 students. So like, for me, I feel completely alienated from the university and completely like, I can't really actually express the disdain and where I'm at in higher education just because of my experiences at UConn where like I was homeless for 3 weeks. Kent knows about this while teaching because y'all switched the payment schedule so I couldn't put money on a security deposit first month and last month. So I'm sitting there fucking showering in a bus station or a truck station to go teach on Friday mornings about anti-racism in an ethics course while y'all are fucking paying a white woman to come do the same thing to some motherfucking administrators that are making fucking six figures. And like, so for me, it's very, very frustrating to see like what shared governance means and like what an actual holistic process might be where we could say like, nah, I recognize that we all have these different positions and like everything that I have experienced can't be fixed. And those are unique experiences and not all of these can be fixed by policy. But I am saying that we can sit here and have legitimate conversations with higher administrators and be like, no, we actually need your help to make this place better. And we don't need you to hide behind this legal shroud or this policy shroud or any of these things. We actually just need you to sit down and say, hey, what can we do to help? And come up with like some solutions towards that and how we can build these relationships to make the university better. And that's sort of where I'm at is like, what can y'all do to actually like advocate for us and provide us resources to change the shit that we're all very, very existentially and deeply passionately committed to change?
And just to jump in real quick to piggyback off of Steve, right? I think Steve highlights so many important things and so many important frustrations that many have been having to deal with the administration of the university. You know, in the past few months, many administrators have communicated that they're interested in being able. Well, the many different things we've been doing, including this meeting, including the letters of demands we put together, including, you know, people like Steve's efforts in FOIA-ing the endowment, right? These are all ways we are pushing to hold the administration of the university accountable and pushing to make this place a better place that truly goals of things like diversity, inclusion, right? Yet in these very same meetings, we're being told that the provost's word has no impact towards the board of trustees, that the board of trustees' decisions don't really have much impact on day-to-day things on the ground. And those things are completely false. I do not believe that the provost's word has no impact on board of trustees or whoever, right? So part of what I think adding on to what Steve's saying, hopefully not, you know, categorizing what you're saying, Steve. But we're trying to hold you all accountable, and we're also trying to change this institution and reimagine it in a way that works for the students, workers, and faculty, right? That we have decision-making power. Because right now the way it's structured is not working for us. It is not working for us. And we're being asked to compromise. We're being asked to find a middle ground. But on a day-to-day basis, we are compromising our well-being through the ways we are exploited, whether emotionally, mentally, through our labor, right? In so many different ways. The ways women have to deal with not only sexual assault on campus, but the way they're treated by the police, the way people of color on campus are treated by the police, right? And endless examples that I'll just end there. But Jordan's on the stack if Jordan would like to jump in.
Thanks, Manny. I just want to add to what both Manny and Steve have said and respond, Kent, to what you said earlier about the Board of Trustees being at a high level and not necessarily directly impacting our day-to-day lives. And I want to also push back on that a little bit because, one, I think we've seen repeatedly just this summer the ways that this high-level budget has constrained a lot of like really necessary efforts that people have been pushing for. And the budget determines a lot of what is able to happen. It gets cited all the time in the no's that people get from like requests and organizing efforts. And so the budget is very, very important, especially when you're in a group of people who A, don't have a lot of money, and B, are organizing like in an area that is also possibly not super well funded. And I also want to say that to the point that a lot of things are worked through with students and faculty and staff before it gets to the Board of Trustees for a final vote, a thing that happens fairly often is that the other structures of the university are also problematic, as Harry or as Manny and Steve have said, and leave out student voices or privilege specific voices. And there are a lot of people very unhappy with the proposal that goes to the Board of Trustees. And what the Board of Trustees decision-making power does is gives them the power to finalize and make permanent a plan that was very problematic for a lot of people to begin with. So it gives legitimacy to something that was already exclusionary and problematic. That's all.
So there's a lot to respond to. Let me just respond to the last thing that was said in terms of the budget. Just to be clear, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but the Board of Trustees doesn't make decisions about individual budgetary decisions at the university. They work with the legislature in determining what UConn's overall budget is. But that's really primarily the legislature. All other decisions are Tom, me, and Scott Jordan. So there's not, in terms of the dollars that go to graduate students, in terms of the dollars that go to the college or the schools, or what goes to at the end of the year, where tuition is set, or all of those things. We're the ones that are responsible for that, not the Board of Trustees. They approve those things, but at least in my experience at Kansas and here, it's most often the case that we bring something and they approve it. So it's not to say that we shouldn't have these conversations about budgets. And I would like us to share a lot more of the budgets. But I don't know what decisions they're making. And so I'm open to thinking about it differently, and maybe I'm just missing it. But I think when we say the Board of Trustees is the problem, what we really mean is me, Tom, and Scott are the problem.
Harry was next on the stack.
Well, I think in addition to budgetary decisions, which I actually, in my experience with the Board of Trustees, they do have a lot of power over a lot of things that the university does with budgets, particularly on the capital project side. They approve that's their area. I think a huge problem with the Board of Trustees is that, I think all of us, generally speaking, come to UConn because we want to learn and we want to grow as people. We come to an educational institution because that's what we think educational institutions are for. The Board of Trustees, in all my experiences with them, do not provide that. Their goals are often, completely alienated from the project of educating the community. They want to, if you hear the way that they talk about UConn, they talk about it as if it's a place to churn out people for the Connecticut workforce, right? To send people to Lockheed Martin so that they can have a sizable, a workforce of engineers. They talk about it as if it's a private business. The Board of Trustees is composed of there's 3 insurance executives. David Lehman is on the board, the guy who's one of the chief architects of the 2008 financial crisis. It is it makes the university operate like a business because it's run by business people. And I think fundamentally what we're asking for is saying we want the university to be run by the people who actually make the university what it is, which is an educational institution, and that is the students, the workers, and the faculty. We are the people that are trying to get educated, trying to educate other people, trying to come together to pursue this noble goal of actually, bringing knowledge into the world for knowledge's sake. And I think that we've strayed so far from that mission, and a large part of that is because we're governed by a body of people who don't have that same mission. And they'll say they have that mission, they'll say that when you ask them, but their actions do not speak to that.
Thank you, Harry. We have Ashley next on the stack.
Yeah, I think that to sort of speak to the question that you just posed, Carl, or maybe the statement, I do think that is an important one, because I think that from my perspective, it actually sort of, when we think about the budget of the university, when we think about budgeting, right, it's not this is not a purely technical process, right? So there are components of the budget of the university that are a technical process. There are components of it that are a political process, and there are many components of it that are also a symbolic process, right? So when we think about how, and to sort of what Harry was just saying, right, about the overall priorities of the university and the I feel like I've been on both sides of this process, right? As a previous administrator, I both was creating and constructing budgets for my unit within the quality financial system, right? In the nitty gritty of how are we actually spending students' fees and what are we doing and all of those things. And also, seeing how the Board of Trustees operates, having gone to many presentations that, that Scott has done. Something that, for example, is really disconcerting to me is that oftentimes I'll go to a presentation that is a public presentation about tuition raises or a public presentation about the budget for the next year, and it's like I'm the only student there, and that is very concerning to me, because I look around and I say, okay, well, I'm here because I study higher education policy, and so I have an interest in this, and this is what I'm doing. But what's happening on a larger scale at all of these aspects of how we are understanding the finances of the university, not just as being technical, like I said, of where are we actually putting money, what are the votes that are actually happening, who is actually putting together these documents, but from the larger perspective of how is it communicated? To what degree do students feel that we are involved in these processes, that these are things that are even up for discussion, right? I would love for there to be a lively conversation and debate at those presentations, right? The fact that there is not makes it much, much easier for Scott Jordan to do his job, right? So there are a lot of things politically, symbolically, and technically that have to do with how the budget is done and how the entire administrative process around it happens. That is not just strictly about whether and who is making the specific decisions. I understand that the Board of Trustees is making decisions about the budget on a high level, and that, as you mentioned, there are many, many administrators like yourself, like Kent, like others at the university, who are making decisions on a more local level that may have higher impacts on what we experience on a day-to-day. But both of those things, I think, are important to critically think about and to understand whether and how student needs are being represented in those, and whether and how, as Harry was mentioning, the financial operation of the university has become increasingly entangled with private interests. And that's not the fault of individual administrators. That's a function of the defunding of higher education at the state level over the course of decades, right? But these are, I think, all of the things that we need to be thinking about. And I think that there are many of us who are thinking about them, and we see the implications happen in our daily lives. But I think that for students to, and workers too, right? Staff and faculty to be engaged in the process means that the way that the process works shouldn't just be about trying to get it done. Like, I get that it's complicated and there's a lot that goes into it, but I think that there's something really essential that is being missed in the way that that process looks right now. And that is at multiple different levels to the degree that it is a complicated and multi-layered process.
So let me maybe frame it a little bit differently and see if this makes sense. I think at the point that we're presenting things to the Board of Trustees, it's too late to have that conversation. And it really doesn't matter what I did at Kansas because it only matters what I do here. But at Kansas, the budget all reported up to the provost. HR reported, everything reported up to the. So I had a lot more control. I had also been there for many years. And so one of the things that we did was we had a monthly meeting. We call it a town hall, whatever, but in person, it went as long as it needed to go. And I presented the actual budget. I presented every dollar that the provost office, and the provost office included almost everything there, spent. So every dollar, the actual budget, we redid it not in accountant speak, but in with bubbles and dollars and things that would make sense to people. And then we had conversations of, there are $4 million new dollars this year. Here is where we want to put this money. And then we took feedback and then we actually showed where we actually put money. We had a monthly meeting where we had undergraduates, graduate students, and we actually took all the faculty off it because we felt like it was actually pushing students into having views they didn't necessarily have. And we presented the budget to them. We talked about, okay, if tuition goes up, where should it be spent? I'm not saying it was perfect, but students at Kansas understood the budget. They knew where we were spending money. And I knew that if we were spending it, like one year, I spent $0 in new initiatives because I knew the other options were too unacceptable to cut things to be able to spend that money on the new initiative. So I am open. I think Scott Jordan is too. I would argue Board of Trustees, and again, maybe I'm wrong, I want to think about it, but I would argue the Board of Trustees isn't the issue when it comes to the budget. It is me and it is Scott. And we have to include you all at the kind of local level and have these conversations and present the budget in a way to you where you actually understand it and you can see where we're spending things. I will also say, Steve, I'm sorry, I don't know a lot of the details of some of the stuff that you shared today. I'm not going to ask you to tell me more because I know who you've been talking to and I will get that information. But we also at Kansas said all FOIAs that come in, we're gonna meet. We used to redact contracts and we said we're not going to redact any contract anymore. So any contract someone wants to see, we started saying we're no longer going to sign NDAs. And so we'll either deal with it and it'll be out there. I'm still in 3 lawsuits from Kansas because we wouldn't do NDAs. So I don't fully understand how to help in terms of the Board of Trustees. I mean, I'm sure that answer is still not satisfying, but it's my answer. But I do think we can do more, me and Scott and Kent, than we are doing now to get you that information and have those conversations.
We have Harry.
If I could just follow on what Carl said there, just to add a little bit. With respect to the Board of Trustees, I think there's clearly discontent with the way it is currently organized. And I would suggest that you should have 2 tracks of action to address your discontent. To the extent you believe the Board of Trustees is not constituted in the way you believe it should be constituted, that's really an issue for the Connecticut State Legislature, and you need to focus your energy there. As Carl was saying, with respect to many of the day-to-day issues that affect all of us with respect to budget, those are almost entirely issues that are dealt with internally by Carl, Scott, me, somebody else. And as Carl was saying, that's probably a place where we could do better at including and communicating and getting input than we have been. And so that's what we can work on with.
We have Harry next in this deck.
So just quickly, sorry, I didn't mean to derail this conversation towards the Board of Trustees so much, but I totally agree that you're correct, obviously, Carl, that there are decisions that are made before they get to the Board of Trustees. But the way that I view it, if I can use a bad analogy, is like the budget or like anything that happens at the university, you're like building a house or you're building a building, and the Board of Trustees is like standing next to that building and they have like a wrecking ball. And they can just like press the button whenever they want, and then it just all goes away because they have the power at the end of the day. They have the ability to have the final say on whatever it is that comes through their door. And I don't think that that's a fair way to govern a university personally. I think that students, faculty, and workers should have that power, that decision-making power to say, hey, we actually don't want to pay a $500 gym fee. We actually don't want to, do all these things. I know that's probably a bad example, but we want to prioritize, tuition going down rather than, spending hundreds of millions of dollars building new buildings every year. That type of thing is something that students, the people that actually make the university should have that power rather than, this unelected group of executives and the mayor of West Hartford.
Yeah, and I think Harry brings up a lot of great points there. We talk a lot about deficits and constrained resources, and all of that is true. But at the same time as that is being said, we see the construction of, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of a rec center, renovations, all those things that was before COVID, right? But also continues under COVID, under the pandemic. And many of these things do not benefit the student body, right? And as Harry mentioned, we do not believe a majority of students or anybody are happy paying $500 extra in fees a year for this new rec center. But putting that aside for a second, and to trying to get something tangible out of this meeting, I know Provost Lejuez has said here and in other spaces that he's happy to share the budget and be more transparent about the budget. Can we get commitment from the administration to not only be fully transparent with the budget and share itemized budget publicly, but also transparency with the endowment, right? So we're saying budget and endowment. And then also, again, our group is pushing for more decision-making power in terms of restructuring both of these things, the budget and endowment, and how these resources are being used.
So I can answer that. So the one thing that I control in the things that you've said is the academic budget. So I will commit right now that we will have full transparency of the academic, whatever that needs to be. If that is a meeting where we pull students together, whether I've thought about, particularly once we can be in person again, having town halls where I would do this and literally put it on the screen and I stand up there and take questions until there aren't more questions. That is a thing that I am fully responsible for. So you have that commitment. So 6 months from now, if there's not progress in that, then I have lied to you. A year from now, if there is not significant progress in that, then I have lied to you. The overall university budget, I also believe Scott Jordan is the same. And I think that he will want to do that too, but I'm not going to commit something that someone else controls without talking to them. But we have had conversations about this, and I have heard Scott say transparency is better. In terms of the endowment, the endowment does not report to me. I don't control that. That doesn't mean I don't have influence, so I need to have an answer. But this is a brand new thing to me today, so I can't commit to this today, but we can have other conversations in the future. And then the last thing is, when it comes to decisions, it's fine if everyone agrees. If we come together and we say, okay, we're going to have what I called collaborative governance, and we will have these conversations, and we will listen to it, and we'll come back and we'll say, okay, this is what we're doing or not doing, and we all agree on it, then that's fine. But at what point, when we disagree, does the administration give up that decision power? And I'm not comfortable giving that up. So I'm comfortable with everything up to that, but I wouldn't even know how to do that. I wouldn't know what are the times in which I actually do that? And is there ever a point where, as the person who's responsible for the decisions, is the person who will be fired based on the consequences of those decisions, the person whose impact is based on making those decisions, which are the ones where I give that up? I will say there are occasionally times where everyone disagrees with me so much that I will say, okay, we'll make a different decision here, but I'm still the one making it. And that's a bridge that I don't know how to cross with you all. So everything up to that, I am willing to do more. I'm willing to figure out, and even when you say you're doing collaborative governance, and I think, Ashley, you referred to this, you can always do more with it. You can always bring people in earlier. You can always have multiple conversations before you get there. You can always have a point in which you actually are truly sharing all the things that you did differently. I am happy to work on improving that, but that's as far as I would even know how to go to.
If I can jump in real quick, unless anyone else wants to jump in. First, I do want to make it clear that we cannot wait 6 months for that kind of commitment in terms of transparency with the budget and the endowment. We are dealing with reopening the campus in the middle of a pandemic. We're still dealing with the implications of maintaining around $15 million a year police department and everything else this group can speak to. So I believe, I'll speak for myself at least, that we need a much better commitment than 6 months to be able to show transparency for the budget and the endowment. And then also we need to be very clear that even though a lot of what we're talking about here is new, right? Not just for UConn, but for the neoliberal university in the United States. Just because it may be new, just because we need to kind of collectively imagine this, doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it, right? So it's not for lack of imagination, it's for a lack of will, and that's what we need from every party, is a will to do these things, right? In order to restructure the university. Excuse me, the university. So I don't know if anyone else wanted to jump in, but I believe Carl would like to respond.
I just want to, 6 months was, so what I will say is, coming in new, a lot of times when we'll say, okay, we'll do this thing, the response, which is a good response, is, well, we don't just want something that's one and done. We want to make sure it's sustained. So when I say 6 months, I mean over a 6 month period, there is this sustained difference. You should see that change quickly. I need a little bit of time. We're opening now, but I would say in a month that we have identified how we can start doing that, and we have started to do it. So I agree with you. 6 months is too long. That was more, I was more trying to say what I want us to do is something that will be sustained in a new way of how we do. So I appreciate you pushing back on that. And
we have Ashley next on the stack.
Yeah, I just want to kind of echo what Manny has started to say here about decision making and our understanding of administrative responsibility and leadership within this university. The critiques that we are leveraging about this really, in some ways, and we've talked a little bit about this, have to do with some of the specifics of like how you all might do differently or better certain things within the current construct of what your roles are within the way that the university is currently set up. But I think that truly that is actually a small portion of what our critique is. And I think that the much larger portion has to do with the fact that the way that those structures have been set up, the way, you talk about, for example, like if I'm the one who has to make this decision at the end of the day, right, then I'm going to be the one who gets fired for it, and that is the culture of our university, right? That is the culture not just of UConn, but of traditionally white research universities writ large in this country. And I think that it's important to highlight that fundamentally one of the things that we are challenging is that having a hierarchical system that situates power almost solely within administrative decision making is not good for the enterprise of higher education. It is not good for furthering, the goals of knowledge creation and humanity and civic engagement and the things that are the mission of this university. And I guess I just want to give voice to the fact that that critique is in many ways larger than your individual roles and the role that you play at this university. But by being administrators at this university, you are implicated in the ways that we understand how to move forward as a higher education institution and as a field of higher education in this country. What has happened over the past several months has obviously been, I hate to say this, an unprecedented crisis. But the reality is that in many ways, this crisis has highlighted things that so many of us already know about how higher education is operating, about the ongoing crisis of higher education. And so I think that part of the urgency that many of us feel about this does not just have to do with our individual student experiences for the time that we are at UConn. It does not just have to do with the individual and unique decisions that are happening within this context. It has to do with a collective sense that what is happening right now is an illustration of fundamental issues with how this university is going to continue to operate. Many of us, right, as PhD students, for example, perhaps got into a PhD program because we want to have a future in higher education as educators, as faculty members, as researchers. I have spent my whole entire career in higher education and studying it. And I have to be honest, I have never in my career, which has been over a decade, experienced such an existential crisis about what is happening at universities. It truly, truly feels like this is a breaking point. And I think that the break has already happened. And so I guess I would just entreat you as leaders of this university, as people who currently are instilled with these responsibilities and power, to recognize that the decisions that you make in the coming months and in the coming years about what happens at UConn have implications that go beyond what's happening right now and have implications about the future of this university and the future of public higher education in this country. And so I think that part of what we are also making is, again, not just sort of this logistical entreaty, but also a moral entreaty about what does this all mean and how does this work? And how do you end up in a situation where you have so many students who feel so left out of what's happening here? And I think that that is something that has to be examined. So I would just say it's a lot bigger than some of these small things. And to Manny's point, it requires a reimagining. And I think that can feel like, we can't go outside of these constructs. The constructs have already been broken. We are in such a crisis that these things are not functioning in the way that we thought that they did or that they should, and different ways of imagining what higher education looks like and different ways of imagining what the governance and decision-making at this university looks like have to happen.
So I have a hard stop in a minute, but I feel like you deserve an answer to that. I am always open to those conversations. I don't see it likely that while I am here as the provost, that we will have a different decision-making structure. So I am offering opportunities to help us do that better. That may not be appealing, but I have to be honest with you too. I don't see while I'm here that, and this is, I think, an example of that. This is a case where we've had a conversation. We clearly are at different places, and I have to make the decision. And the decision is we will likely continue making decisions in the same way we've had. So I hope there are ways where we can work together to help us make better decisions. But I also understand that what you're asking for is not what I'm offering. So I have to accept whatever the consequences of that. So we should be in touch and figure out kind of what the next steps are. I have a few things that I've talked to a few of you about that I'll reach out again, but at this point I do need to jump off. So thank you for your time, and we'll have more conversations.
Thank you, Carl and Kent, and thank you everybody who was able to make it today. Hopefully we can speak again soon. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Manny.